name's Steve Kurzman. Um, Today is the third Sunday in August. Um, that day is the third Sunday in August is more significant to me than the calendar day. I'd like to take a moment to tell my story. It's a story that a few people know. Very few people know. I don't tell it often. I usually give a very abbreviated version, but I'd like to take a moment and give the full version. This is gonna be a long video. It starts a year ago today. It was a beautiful day. It was a beautiful Sunday. And what led up to this Sunday was I owned a business and I work 6-7 days a week, 60 to 80 hours a week. I worked a lot and I wasn't home often. And I had a very loving partner and husband. His name was Toby. And Toby and I were together for 13 and a half years. And what led up to this Sunday was prior, almost 30 days to the day before, we got married. We were together for a long time. We wore rings for a long time. A lot of people thought we were married for a long time. But we got married on July 23rd, 2021, very quietly. And we were getting ready to celebrate a month of us being formally married. And I took a day off of work and we wanted to go celebrate. We decided, because we haven't gone out in a long time, we were people that used to frequent going out as much as we can whenever we could. But things were different within the recent time a year ago. We were in a very tough situation with our house, some people know. Our landlords were in the process of trying to sell our house from underneath us. We were in the house for 13 years. They were looking to cash out on the high market. So we had a housing crisis. Our stress was very high, and one of the reasons why we got married was just because everybody kept asking us, are you guys married? And you give them like this weird story. We just thought it'd be easier just to go ahead and do it, streamline things. So we haven't been out in a while, and we decided to go to one of our usual spots, a place that we went for brunch often. We were very regular, we were very well known, and we went. And when we got there, we didn't know anybody. It just didn't feel right. And we had a couple drinks and just kind of looked at each other and trying to figure out, where do you want to go? We weren't feeling it. So we decided that maybe we'd go to this one place that we used to go to often, a Mexican place. Between me and him, it would get very expensive. You start drinking tequila and it becomes a very, very high bill. And I told him that, look, I'll pay for it. Let's treat ourselves to something good. And let's go have a good time. So we left. And we went to the next place. And we sat down and we just started drinking, having shots and margaritas. Had an appetizer. And we were having a great time. and I got up to go use the bathroom. And when I came back, he said that, okay, he's ready to go, that he paid the bill. And I said, get ready to go? I just went to the bathroom. Why are we leaving? We haven't even eaten yet. Why are we leaving? And he thought that I wanted to go, and I turned a big stink into it. He said that, we could just start another tab. I said, no, if you want to go, let's just go. So we left, and we got into the car. Now, I drove. I always drive. Toby's job was revolved around breathalyzer systems in cars. He could not get a DUI or anything like it because his career would be on the line. So I always drove everywhere, responsibly, irresponsibly. But I drove, and we left. And as we left, things escalated. Now, mind you, we're not very far from our house. It's a fairly short drive. We're driving back neighborhood streets. And things just are escalating now at this point. And I decided to stop the car and get out and say, I'm walking home. You drive. Now, I've never done that before. I've kicked him out. I've kicked him out once or twice. But I never got out before. And I got out. And I started walking down the street, and he jumped in the car and he drove away. And I started walking down the street. And next thing I know, I can hear the car. It was loud. And he was coming very fast. And I see him coming, and I'm at a 4-way intersection with a stop sign. And he just comes and tries to make a left-hand turn. And he's doing it at speed, and the car just turns, but it just washes out. And he loses control. And he plows into a fence. And the car's stuck. Nobody's hurt. But now the car is crumpled on somebody's property in a fence. And I told him that to go home. I said, Toby, go home. I'll deal with this. You go home. Because I can take the hit. I owned a business. He couldn't. And he started walking away. And later, my mom picked him up and brought him home. And I sat there and I waited for the cops. And I figured, I'm going to jail. I was drinking. And I waited. People that passed by, they saw what happened. And I told them the quick rundown on the story, and they gave me a cigarette. And they stayed. So when the cops came, which they did, they gave them their side of the story, which was I was driving, lost control, I skidded on rocks, and they should really clean up the street. That's what they told the cops. And the cops were there, and everything was fine. He asked if I could get a tow truck for it. I said yes. But before the cops came, and I called him, and I was very angry. And I was yelling at him, just said, remember I'm doing this for you. Just remember, and get money to bail me out of jail. I'm doing this for you. And they were very angry and hateful words. The tow truck came, and we loaded the tow truck with the car. We're gonna ride with him and take it to a dealership. So I go with him, and we go down the road, and we get to the dealership, and the gates are closed, so we have to do this another big circle that took 5 minutes to do this big loop. And we couldn't find a spot, so I asked him I have a friend who had a shop down the street. I said, let's just drop the car off down the street at my friend's place. It'll be fine. It was Sunday. Nothing's open. And I called my mom. And I told her where I'm going to be and to come pick me up. And we dropped the car off. And she picks me up. And we go back home. When I get home, get out of the car, and I beat on the door real loud. And nobody answers the door. So we never carried keys on us. Somebody was always at home. My mother-in-law lived in the house. Somebody was always home. My mom grabs her keys and she opens my door. And I look in the living room and I don't see anybody, and I figure he's in the kitchen smoking a cigarette, and we're just getting ready to have words. And I go walking back towards the kitchen, and I get to the hallway. When I get to the hallway, I just see out of the corner of my eye, and I turn my head, and I just see him hanging from the ceiling. And I get over to him, and I try to pick him up, but I couldn't pick him up. And I just grab his face, and I just push his face back, and he falls down on the ground. And he's not blue. He's not cold. And I was screaming, no, no, no. And my mom came in and she saw, and she starts screaming, and she calls 911, and I just start giving him mouth to mouth because that's what I know what to do. I'm just giving him mouth to mouth, just looking at him, just saying, please, please come back to me. And my mom gives me the phone, and they start walking me through CPR, and I start giving him CPR, and I don't know how much time's passing. It's quick though, it's not a lot of time. And I hear sirens and fire come, and then they take over. And they're working on him for longer than I was there. And they say that they got a pulse. And they load him up into an ambulance, and they took him away. And I get into my truck, and I broke every single moving violation I could possibly break. And I get to the emergency room, and I wasn't allowed in because of COVID. They wouldn't let me in, and they wouldn't tell me anything. And I sat outside automatic doors like this for 2 hours, just waiting for somebody to tell me something. I called my friends, my closest friends, and I told them what happened. And I just sat there and I waited, crying. I saw a man in the hospital who helped another family who was begging for information. And the man was able to help them out. And I saw their family member come walking out fine. So I go to the man, a fucking train wreck, and I begged him. I said, please, I need to know what's happening. Please help me. And he disappeared inside. And after about another 15, 20 minutes, he came and he pulled me inside. And he took me. And he took me to a waiting room. A private waiting room. I've been down this road. I've done it once before. I know what happens when you go into a private waiting room. And I sat in there and I waited. I waited in there for over an hour. To have a doctor come and tell me that he is alive. But a lot of damage has been done. And his chances are not very good. And I asked, when can I see him? And they said that he's going to the ICU. And when he gets there, they need to do a COVID test and keep him. And that I probably won't see him until tomorrow morning. But I waited. And the very nice man, he was a chaplain, he waited with me. And then when we found out where he got moved to, he brought me over there so I knew where he was. And they told me that I couldn't see him until tomorrow. So I went home. I went home to a house that I didn't want to be in. And I tried to sleep on my couch, but I couldn't sleep. Because all I could think of is time. Time. Because I wasn't that late. If I didn't do a 5-minute loop again with the tow truck, how different things could be. Or a few minutes here, or a stop sign there, or a stoplight here, or... I found out what time I could get there, and the restaurant and the hospital opened at 5, so I got there at 5. I was there at 4:30, waiting for the restaurant to open at 5. And I stayed there, and I waited there until 7, to when I can get my badge to go up. And they told me that I shouldn't go up there till 8, but I begged them. And they let me go see him early. And I go up to the ICU and I check in and I go to see him and I get yelled at because I'm early, and he said that they should never have let me up. And I begged him. I said, look, I'll be very quiet. I'll be out of your way. I'll stay outside the room. Just let me know when I can see him. And I waited. And at 8 o'clock, they opened the door and said I could come in. And he was in a bodysuit because they were trying to keep him cold. And his head was completely wrapped up because he had an EEG on, monitoring his brain. He was on a ventilator. And his eyes were shut. He was there. And I remember talking to him. And when I talked to him, he had just a couple tears run down his face. And I stayed there. And I held his hand. And I just stayed. My friends came very soon after. And she showed up with all the necessities anyone could ever need. Fresh socks. And just put chapstick and lotion. Just anything that I needed. Advil, and tissues, and soda, and water, and granola bars, and a blanket. And I met her downstairs and she gave me these things. And I went back upstairs for the night. And I was waiting. I had a chair next to him and we were holding our arms together. I looked over at the blanket and I pulled it out. It was a big, queen size, huge, knitted throw blanket. And I went and I put the blanket on him. And I crawled underneath one side. And you don't know what it's like just to share a blanket with somebody. And I stayed there as long as I could. But there was curfews. And they let me stay a little bit past, but I had to leave. I went home to a house I didn't want to be in. I went back the next day early. I don't sleep. And I get there and I meet my friends there. Now at this time, only one of us could go up at a time. But they waited. And I could spend as much time with him as I could. And I talked to him. doctors would come and see us later and just tell me that, show me scans of his brain. This little foggy area is dead, and this little cloudy area is not good, and it's not good. It's not good at all. By Wednesday they say they want to do an apnea test. And what an apnea test is they remove the ventilator to see if you're breathing on your own. And it's what they use to help determine brain death. And I said, okay. And I was told that it was going to be something very difficult, that I didn't have to be there, but I said no. I will absolutely be there. And that I asked if my friends could be there, and they said yes. And we went, and we got ready for the apnea test. And what they did first is they'd go to check his physical responses, and it's something that never recorded. He never passed any of these tests the whole time we were there. And they go and hit his knees, nothing. And this doctor would scream his name in his face. Toby, can you hear me? No. They'd open his eyes, and he never saw his pupils dilate. And they'd take a little something and dab his eyes to see if he flinches or blinks. Didn't want to do that either. And then they said, okay, you're gonna go ahead and go through the test. And they draw blood first. And then after 10 minutes, they'll draw blood again. And that will determine the results of the test. They go and draw blood. And at this time, I'm sitting on his right hand side, and our arms are locked like that. And then they go ahead and remove the vent. They don't pull it all the way out, they just disconnect it. I just lay my head down. And I just feel this. Oh my God, it's air just leaving. And I felt it. Now, the third time, I look up, and the respiratory nurse, her eyes were as wide as they could be. And I look around the room, and everybody's just stunned. And they stopped the test in under a minute because he's breathing. What does this mean? What does it mean? Why now it's something that's becoming harder. It's just becoming harder. What does it mean? And I go home. I stayed there late that night, as late as they let me. And I go home, and I talk to my cousin. I tell him what happened with this test. And as I'm talking to him, I see this owl right in front of me in the tree. I've had a significant owl story, and I don't have time to tell this, but I've had a very significant owl story. So an owl is something that's it's very strong to me. It's very significant. I'm telling my cousin about the owl, and the owl goes and flies right next to the sidewalk next to my truck as I'm sitting in it. I turn my head, and we lock eyes, and it flew away. It was just very powerful. And I hung up with my cousin, and I go inside, and he then sends me a text message and said that he was struck by the story, and he didn't want to tell me then, but knew it was worth sharing, that he respected my dad, and my dad was somebody who, he's the reason why I know about waiting rooms in hospitals. And when my dad died, he wanted to do something to commemorate him. And his mom, my aunt, told him that my dad always loved owls. So he got a tattoo, a Day of the Dead tattoo with an owl on it. And it was something that is to respect the dead and my dad. And it was just something that means a lot to him, and he shared that with me. And it struck me because I felt that somebody I loved very much was looking after somebody else who I loved very much. I go into Thursday feeling good. I had this experience, the apnea test, this owl thing. I feel good. I have hope. And I would sit there, and Toby loves Star Trek and Stargate and all these star things, and I put episodes on for him next to his head so he could hear, and I'd change that between that and music and quiet time to give him rest, because I was just trying to keep him stimulated. And at the end of Thursday, it wasn't so great, you know. It was okay, you know. We went to Friday. And then by Friday afternoon, it really hit me. And I said I knew what the meaning of the owl story was. And it was somebody who I loved being there, telling me that it's okay, that he's there with somebody I love very much. And that it'll be okay. And by late Friday, I decided that I was going to wait until tomorrow, and that tomorrow will be the day. And I went home. And I prepared myself. And I went back on Saturday. I went early. And I made sure that anybody that needed to come see him, they did. And it took a lot of strength. And when I got there to a point on Saturday, to when I was ready, my friends and I, we go up, and there's been a shift change at the hospital. And this girl, She's all bubbly and sweet, and she goes, "Oh, hi, I hear that we're gonna do this thing today. Oh my god, And she was all hoppy and bubbly, and it was wrong. I said, there's no fucking way we're doing this right now. So I stayed there. I stayed with him that night. And I got underneath her blanket. I stayed late. She let me stay there till like 2 a.m., which was very late. I went home. I came back the next morning early. And I go up to see him. And he's glowing. He looks the best I've ever seen him. Little Miss Sunshine took very good care of him that night. And I chose to spend the whole morning there by myself. And I made sure he watched his favorite episodes. I hold his hand. And as we were getting close to time, they're gonna go and watch him, and I got to help. And I watched him. I removed as much as the things from him as I could. And we made his bed. At 3 o'clock, my friends came up to my room with me. And I had 3 o'clock in my mind because it was 3 o'clock a week ago, on the third week of August. Everything went wrong. Where people lost touch with him. And I just felt right to let him go. He wanted to leave then, and I wanted to let him go when he wanted to go. And they came in. And they removed everything. And I sat there. And I held his hand. And I kissed his lips. And I told him I loved him. And I thanked him. And then a song came on that we shared. A song that we used to send to each other. Just as a little I love you. It's a Coldplay song called Till Kingdom Come. And I held his head and I sang it to his ear. Until somebody tapped my shoulder and told me he's gone. is my story from a year ago. It's how my life has changed. I wanted to share this story. So everybody knows you love your loved ones a little more. You never know when you might have a